There's a sacred misunderstanding about those who feel deeply. The world calls them healers, fixers, nurturers. It sees their compassion as medicine and their tenderness as the antidote to human pain. But the truth is far more profound and far more uncomfortable. The empath is not the medicine. The empath is the mirror. They were never sent to soothe others into silence. They were sent to awaken what the world hides beneath its masks. Their sensitivity is not a balm for wounds. It is a revelation of them. Wherever they go, they bring to light the emotions others bury, the truths they run from, and the pain they pretend not to feel. That is why their presence can feel unsettling. It exposes what people would rather leave untouched. To mirror, not to mend. This is the secret purpose of the empathic soul. When you meet one, something inside you stirs. Perhaps it's an old memory, a forgotten sorrow, or a piece of yourself you tried to abandon. You may feel an inexplicable pull toward them, or paradoxically, a resistance, as if their energy pierces through your carefully built walls. That's because they do. Empaths dissolve illusion by simply existing in truth. They carry an atmosphere of honesty that the unconscious cannot tolerate for long. Their perception moves beyond words, beyond logic. They sense what's unspoken, the grief behind laughter, the fear beneath anger, the longing under indifference. It's not that they seek it out, it's that they can't not see it. The empath's gift is sight, an inner vision that perceives what lies in the shadows of the psyche. And yet, because they see so deeply, they often make the mistake of believing they must fix what they witness. They mistake their reflection for responsibility. They absorb what is not theirs, thinking it's love. They carry the emotional debris of others, confusing empathy with sacrifice. But true empathy is not absorption, it is awareness. It is the courage to hold up the mirror, to show the truth without losing oneself in it. Every empath must eventually face this transformation from healer to revealer, from rescuer to awakener. It is not an easy evolution. It requires the death of the savior identity, the need to be needed, the urge to mend what's broken in others as a way to avoid facing one's own pain. For as long as the empath remains the medicine, they stay trapped in cycles of depletion and despair. But when they realize they are the mirror, they begin to understand their true power. To mirror means to embody clarity. It means to stand before another being and let them see themselves, their patterns, their defenses, their beauty, their shadow. This is the most uncomfortable gift a person can receive. Few are ready for it. Many will project their unhealed pain onto the empath, accusing them of being too sensitive, too intense, or too much. What they're really saying is, I can't face what your presence makes me see. The empath's strength then lies not in rescuing others from their reflection, but in holding that reflection steady. They must learn to let people sit in their own discomfort without rushing to erase it, because it's in that discomfort that awakening happens. The mirror doesn't heal by touching the wound. It heals by showing the wound clearly enough that the one who carries it can no longer deny it. In this way, the empath becomes a silent catalyst for transformation. They don't preach, they don't demand, they simply are. Their authenticity stirs dormant consciousness in others. It's as if their energy whispers, see yourself, remember what you've buried, feel what you've forgotten, and those who are ready to awaken will. Those who aren't will turn away, sometimes with blame or resentment. But the empath's role remains unchanged. When the empath stops trying to be the medicine, they are freed from the weight of the world's pain. They no longer internalize the suffering they perceive. They observe it, reflect it, and release it. Their empathy becomes precision, a laser of truth that cuts through illusion instead of a sponge that absorbs every wound. In that shift, they step into their rightful place as mirrors of consciousness, awakeners of truth, and keepers of emotional integrity. The mirror doesn't lie, it doesn't soothe, it doesn't fix. It simply reveals. That is its power. That is the power of an empath who has remembered their purpose: to awaken, not to anesthetize. The world doesn't need more emotional bandages, it needs more mirrors willing to reflect reality in its raw, unfiltered form. To be that mirror is not easy. It means being misunderstood, rejected, or even vilified by those who are not yet ready to see. It means being blamed for the discomfort that truth brings. But the mirror remains still, for it knows that its reflection is the beginning of transformation. Through every encounter, every unspoken revelation, every uncomfortable moment of honesty, the empath fulfills their quiet purpose, not to heal the wound, but to make the wound visible enough that it finally begins to heal itself. There is a sorrow that only those who feel deeply can understand. A quiet ache that lies beneath the surface of sensitivity. It is not the pain of being hurt, but the pain of perceiving too much. The empath carries this burden not because they choose to, but because their very nature is attuned to what others cannot bear to see. They stand at the threshold between seen and unseen, feeling both the beauty and the brokenness of existence in their rawest forms. To perceive deeply is to live without the protection of numbness. It is to notice the tremor in someone's voice when they pretend to be fine, the shadow behind their smile, the tension between their words and their truth. It is to sense what remains unspoken, the grief wrapped in laughter, the despair disguised as strength, the loneliness hiding inside connection. Most people move through life unaware of these undercurrents, but the empath feels them as if they were their own. The world calls it a gift, but for the empath, it often feels like a wound that never closes. Perception is not passive for them. It is an act of absorption. They don't just see emotion, they receive it. When they enter a room, they pick up the energy like static electricity, collecting every trace of tension, sadness, and longing that lingers in the air. It's not empathy in the simple sense. It's energetic resonance, a full body awareness of other people's inner landscapes. And while this depth of sensitivity allows them to understand humanity at its core, it also leaves them exposed to its suffering. They see too much, and the world is not gentle. They feel too much, and society has no place for feelings that deep. So they learn to hide their awareness, to mute their intuition, to pretend they don't notice what they can't stop perceiving. They laugh when the crowd laughs, nod when the world nods, but inside they carry the silent weight of understanding too much. This is the pain of perception, the agony of seeing truth in a world that worships illusion. What others call sensitivity, the empath experiences as survival. Their perception is constantly scanning, measuring, anticipating the emotional climate. They sense when someone's words carry deception, when affection masks manipulation, when love hides control. And though they may not always have proof, their intuition rarely lies. It's not paranoia, it's perception in its purest form, unfiltered, untrained, unrelenting. But this gift comes with a cost, because they perceive so clearly. Empaths often internalize what they see. They take responsibility for the moods and wounds of others, as if by understanding them deeply, they might somehow relieve their pain. They become the silent holders of everyone's darkness, the emotional containers for what others cannot process. They feel guilt for walking away, shame for setting boundaries, and sadness for not being able to heal what is not theirs to heal. There is no greater exhaustion than carrying what you cannot change. And yet, the empath continues to perceive, continues to feel, continues to absorb, because perception is not something they can turn off. It's the way their soul was designed to interact with the world. Their sensitivity is not a choice, it is a consciousness. The pain of perception deepens when truth becomes unbearable. To perceive too much means seeing the patterns people hide from themselves. The friend who smiles but secretly despises their own reflection. The partner who loves with words but withdraws with silence. The society that glorifies success while starving for meaning. The empath sees it all. The contradictions, the hypocrisies, the self-deception, and it hurts, not out of judgment, but out of compassion, because they know what could be if only the world would awaken to itself. There is a loneliness in this vision. To see clearly is to stand apart. Empaths often find themselves misunderstood or labeled as overreactive because their awareness pierces deeper than most are willing to go. They notice subtleties others overlook, and when they speak of them, people recoil, insisting that things are not as bad as they seem, but they are. The empath just perceives the undercurrent that others can't yet feel. They live in a dimension of honesty that many fear to enter. And so many empaths retreat into solitude. They need space to recover from the overstimulation of feeling everything so vividly. In solitude, their perception becomes clearer, their senses recalibrate, and their hearts remember that not every emotion belongs to them. But even in quiet, they still sense the hum of collective unrest, the anxiety, the grief, the suppressed rage of a world out of alignment. They are attuned not only to individuals, but to humanity itself. The empath's awakening begins when they stop trying to carry what they perceive, when they realize that their role is not to heal, but to witness. Perception, when purified, is revelation. It shows others what they cannot yet face. It brings to light the emotions that must be felt before transformation can occur. The empath's pain, then, is not meaningless. It is the ache of consciousness pressing against the limits of denial. Every moment of deep perception is both a wound and a wisdom. It cuts through illusion and exposes the heart of truth. And though it may break them at times, it is also what makes them whole. To see without filters, to feel without barriers, to know without needing proof. That is the empath's cross and their crown, their suffering and their strength, their deepest pain and their silent power. Awareness is the great transmuter. It is the silent fire that turns pain into understanding, confusion into clarity, and chaos into meaning. For the empath, awareness is not merely an act of noticing, it is an act of transformation. It takes the raw, overwhelming energy of emotion and refines it into wisdom. This process is not gentle, it is alchemical. It burns away illusion, it dissolves attachment, it strips away everything false until only truth remains. Empaths come into the world with an extraordinary sensitivity, a radar tuned to the frequencies most people ignore. They feel the undercurrents of emotion, the tension hidden behind words, the vibrations that pulse beneath the ordinary rhythm of life. At first, this awareness feels like a curse. It makes them restless, exposed, overwhelmed. The energies of others flow through them like unfiltered electricity, leaving them exhausted and disoriented. They do not yet know that what feels like chaos is actually potential, the raw material for awakening. Awareness in its early stage is heavy. It shows everything: the lies people tell themselves, the fear behind ambition, the emptiness behind noise. The empath sees it all, and the weight of that seeing can crush them. They think something is wrong with them for feeling so deeply. They try to numb it, hide it, or escape it. But awareness cannot be buried. It calls them back again and again, asking not to be denied, but to be understood. The alchemy begins the moment they stop resisting. When the empath finally stops running from their sensitivity and turns inward, awareness changes shape. It stops being chaos and starts becoming clarity. The flood of perception that once drowned them becomes a river that guides them. What once felt unbearable becomes meaningful. Every feeling, every intuition, every tremor in the energy field around them begins to reveal patterns, not random pain, but messages. Awareness teaches the empath that emotion is not the enemy. Emotion is the language of the unconscious. It carries wisdom in its intensity, truth in its discomfort. The moment they allow themselves to fully feel without judgment, awareness begins its alchemical work. Fear transforms into understanding. Grief becomes compassion. Anger turns into boundary. What was once poison becomes power. This is the sacred shift from absorption to transformation. In the lower state, the empath absorbs energy. They take in the pain of others, thinking it's their duty to heal it. But in the higher state, they transmute energy. They let awareness flow through them, observing, understanding, releasing. They become like a sacred vessel through which the energy of human experience is purified. They don't carry pain, they convert it. They don't suppress truth, they illuminate it. The alchemy of awareness is not about escaping darkness, but embracing it fully. The empath learns that to transform pain, they must first face it without flinching. Awareness requires courage, the courage to look at what others avoid, to feel what others repress, to acknowledge what others deny. Every shadow revealed by awareness is a doorway into deeper consciousness. When they stop labeling emotions as good or bad and begin to see them as forces of transformation, their sensitivity becomes strength. To live with such awareness is to walk through life awake. The empath no longer reacts to everything they feel. They witness it. They become observers of energy rather than victims of it. When they feel someone's anger, they recognize it as unprocessed hurt. When they sense manipulation, they see the fear beneath it. When they encounter cruelty, they perceive the shadow of deep self-rejection. Awareness gives them vision, not the kind that sees faces, but the kind that sees souls. Through awareness, empathy matures into discernment. The empath no longer gives themselves away to every vibration they sense. They understand that not every energy deserves their engagement. Awareness teaches them the sacred art of neutrality, to stand in presence without becoming entangled. They become alchemists of the unseen, turning heavy emotion into insight simply by allowing it to move through their consciousness without resistance. But this transformation does not happen once. It happens endlessly. Each day brings new waves of perception, new energies to interpret, new emotions to understand. Awareness is not a state, it is a practice. It refines itself through experience, through pain, through solitude. The empath learns to trust their perception not as a burden, but as guidance. Awareness begins to reveal a pattern that connects everything. How personal pain mirrors collective pain, how individual healing ripples through the human field, how truth always finds its way to the surface when it is witnessed without fear. The more awareness deepens, the lighter the empath becomes. They realize that they are not meant to fix the world, but to perceive it clearly enough that it begins to heal itself. The clarity of awareness is contagious. When an empath stands in pure presence, without judgment or reaction, others begin to feel their own truth rise to the surface. Awareness spreads like light, wordless, invisible, transformative. The alchemy of awareness turns suffering into wisdom because it teaches that nothing is wasted. Every emotion carries information. Every pain hides a message. Every experience, no matter how dark, is an ingredient in the larger transformation of consciousness. The empath becomes the living proof that awareness itself is healing, that seeing clearly is the most radical act of love. That truth, once brought into light, always changes what it touches. In the end, awareness is not just perception, it is creation. It reshapes reality by revealing it. It dissolves illusion, exposes the hidden architecture of emotion, and brings order to what once felt chaotic. Awareness doesn't remove pain, it purifies it. It doesn't erase darkness, it illuminates it. And through that illumination, everything it touches begins to transform. Beneath the surface of civilization lies an unseen field, a dense, pulsing energy made of every emotion humanity has ever denied. It is the accumulation of our unspoken fears, our buried griefs, our repressed desires. It is the darkness we refuse to claim, projected outward into systems, beliefs, and behaviors. This is the collective shadow, the hidden face of humanity, the psychological underworld of the world itself. The empath feels this shadow not as an abstract idea, but as a living force. They walk through life sensing the invisible tension of human denial, the heaviness in the air, the dissonance behind social masks, the ache beneath the constant noise of progress. Where others see normality, they feel distortion. Where others see success, they sense emptiness. The empath's body becomes the tuning fork of collective emotion, vibrating with the unprocessed pain of humanity. This sensitivity can be unbearable. The empath wakes up anxious for no reason, only to realize they're absorbing the collective unease that hangs over cities and screens. They feel drained not from their own lives, but from the energy of a society that refuses to slow down, reflect, or feel. Every time the world numbs itself through distraction, the empath becomes the one who feels on its behalf. They carry the emotional bill for humanity's avoidance. The collective shadow is not born of evil, it is born of suppression. For centuries, humankind has divided itself into light and dark, good and bad, acceptable and forbidden. We celebrate joy and deny sorrow, glorify strength and shame vulnerability, honor logic and exile intuition. Each time we repress part of ourselves, that energy doesn't disappear, it migrates into the collective unconscious. Over generations, these exiled aspects of the psyche gather power. They influence culture, relationships, and institutions from the shadows, driving behavior without awareness. The empath becomes the bridge between the seen and the unseen. Their nervous system feels what the collective mind refuses to process. The anger society hides turns into their fatigue. The loneliness of millions becomes their melancholy. the grief buried under entertainment and ambition becomes their quiet ache. To the empath, this weight feels personal, but it isn't. They are simply open enough to register what others have numbed themselves against. At first, this connection to the collective shadow feels like a curse. The empath believes they are fragile or flawed, too sensitive for a hard world. But over time, awareness reveals the truth. Their sensitivity is not weakness, it is perception. They are mirrors for humanity's emotional truth, living indicators of the psychic imbalance that society pretends does not exist. Their exhaustion is not a sign of failure, it's a symptom of empathy in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Every culture has its own version of denial, its own unhealed shadow. Some bury shame under pride, others bury fear under control. Some hide pain under religion, others under reason. But the pattern remains: whatever we refuse to face within ourselves becomes the shadow of the collective. It emerges as conflict, division, addiction, and unrest. The empath senses these energies long before they manifest externally. They feel the tremor of imbalance before it erupts into chaos, because the emotional storm begins in the unseen before it breaks into the visible world. To feel this collective tension is to walk between worlds. The empath sees the outer performance of humanity, the smiles, the noise, the endless pursuit of progress, and feels the inner void that drives it. They notice how people mistake distraction for joy, consumption for fulfillment, reaction for connection. The empath does not judge this, they simply feel it. And in feeling it, they carry a portion of it until awareness transforms it. The empath's journey is the journey of discernment. They must learn what is theirs and what belongs to the collective. Without that awareness, they drown in energies that were never meant to be theirs to hold. The emotional heaviness that seems personal is often ancestral or societal, the residue of generations of suppression. When the empath begins to separate their true essence from the weight of collective emotion, they begin to reclaim their own energy. This is the first step toward turning pain into insight. The collective shadow does not dissolve through avoidance, it dissolves through recognition. Every time an empath chooses to feel consciously, to allow emotion to move through without resistance, they are transmuting a small portion of humanity's unconscious weight. Their awareness becomes a silent act of service. They are not fixing the world through effort, they are transforming it through perception. Each time they bring compassion to what others deny, a fragment of the shadow loses its power. To awaken to the collective shadow is to see how interconnected everything truly is. The empath understands that no pain exists in isolation. Every judgment, every fear, every prejudice we see on the surface has roots in the unseen layers of the human psyche. The cruelty we witness is the projection of inner fragmentation. The greed we condemn is the shadow of inner emptiness. The chaos in the world is not random, it is the collective reflection of unintegrated consciousness. Through this awareness, the empath becomes not only a witness, but a mirror. A reflection of what the collective soul is trying to remember. Their sensitivity is not a personal flaw, but an evolutionary function. They are here to awaken the human field to its own forgotten depth. They do this not by preaching or fighting, but by feeling fully, consciously, truthfully. Every empath carries a fragment of the world's denied emotion. And through their awareness, that emotion begins to find light. This is the unseen work of awakening, not the dramatic act of changing the world from the outside, but the subtle alchemy of perceiving it from within. The collective shadow cannot be healed by those who fear it. It can only be illuminated by those willing to face it with open eyes and an unguarded heart. Every empath's journey begins with a wound. It may not be visible to the world, but it shapes everything. How they see, how they feel, how they love. It is the silent imprint of every moment they were made to believe that feeling deeply was weakness, that caring too much was foolish, that seeing truth where others saw comfort made them wrong. The wound is not just emotional, it's existential. It's the ache of being awake in a world that rewards numbness. This wound, though born of pain, becomes the foundation of transformation. For the empath, every sensitivity that once felt like a curse hides within it a key to profound understanding. Their suffering teaches them to listen beyond words, to sense energy beyond form, to perceive truth beyond appearances. The wound becomes their teacher, relentless, honest, transformative. It strips them of illusion and forces them to confront reality without the filters others depend on for survival. In the beginning, the empath tries to escape the wound. They attempt to be strong by becoming less sensitive, by silencing their emotions, by blending into a world that doesn't understand depth. But repression never brings peace. The pain only grows quieter, not smaller. It seeps into the spaces between thoughts, into the silence of night, into the moments when they can no longer distract themselves with helping others. Because beneath the surface, the wound whispers a truth the empath cannot unhear, that what hurts is also what awakens. Every heartbreak, betrayal, rejection, and disappointment becomes part of the alchemy. The empath begins to see that the pain they endured was never punishment. It was initiation. The wound was carving space within them for wisdom to take root. Only those who have felt the extremes of emotion can understand the full spectrum of the human experience. Only those who have known darkness can recognize the light without illusion. The world often romanticizes empathy as pure love and light, but true empathy is forged in the fires of pain. It is not born from comfort, it is born from survival. The empath learns compassion not because life was kind to them, but because it wasn't. They understand suffering because they have lived it, absorbed it, and been transformed by it. Their heart did not open through ease, it opened through breaking. This breaking is not destruction, it is revelation. Every time the empath's heart breaks, it cracks open the walls of conditioning, releasing what was hidden inside. Through the fracture, truth seeps in. The truth that pain and purpose are not separate. The wound becomes the portal through which consciousness deepens. What was once unbearable becomes sacred because it teaches the empath how to hold pain without turning away, how to sit in darkness without losing their light. As the empath evolves, their relationship with pain changes. They no longer see it as an enemy to be defeated, but as a messenger carrying meaning. Pain reveals where energy is stuck, where truth is ignored, where healing demands attention. When they stop judging their suffering and begin to observe it with awareness, the wound begins to unravel. It shows them not only what hurt them, but also who they truly are beyond the hurt. From this awareness, wisdom is born, not the intellectual kind that comes from study, but the embodied kind that comes from lived experience. Wisdom speaks softly, not in theories, but in presence. It whispers, "You are not broken for feeling deeply, you are awake." It reminds the empath that their pain was not meaningless, that every tear shed in confusion was watering the roots of consciousness. The wound transforms when it is no longer resisted. When the empath stops trying to fix themselves and begins to understand themselves, something profound occurs. The same sensitivity that once made them fragile becomes their greatest strength. They begin to see the patterns of life, the invisible connections between cause and effect, the subtle threads weaving pain into purpose. They can sense when others are carrying old wounds disguised as anger, ambition, or indifference. Their wisdom becomes intuitive, an inner knowing that transcends logic, and yet this transformation is not a single moment of enlightenment. It is a lifelong process of integration. The empath learns to revisit their wounds, not to reopen them, but to retrieve the wisdom hidden within. They understand that every layer of pain carries a deeper truth about love, boundaries, authenticity, and surrender. What once felt like endless suffering becomes a map of awakening. From wound to wisdom, the empath's evolution is the story of transmutation. They move from feeling everything unconsciously to feeling consciously, from being consumed by pain to being guided by it. They realize that the wound was never meant to define them, it was meant to refine them. It stripped away the superficial layers of identity so that only truth could remain. Through it, they learned what compassion truly means, not rescuing others from their pain, but standing beside them in understanding. The empath's wisdom is quiet. It doesn't preach or prove. It radiates. It moves through presence, through the calm steadiness of someone who has felt the storm and no longer fears it. They carry peace not because life spared them pain, but because they have made peace with pain itself. They have learned that healing is not the absence of suffering, but the mastery of perception. Through their journey, the empath becomes the living embodiment of transformation. Their heart, once wounded, once fragile, becomes the bridge between darkness and light, between emotion and awareness. And though the world may never fully understand the depth of their quiet strength, it will always be touched by the wisdom that was born from their pain